This is Professor Michael Chapman. I'm one of the most experienced IVF doctors in Australia. I believe that an important part that I can contribute is to educate patients in relation to fertility, infertility, and all that involves. These series of podcasts help to educate you. I hope they are helpful to you. If you wish to know more, however, I'm more than happy to have you contact me via email, which is profmchapman@gmail.com, or make an appointment to see me on 9138 4222. Hi there, this is Professor Michael Chapman. I'm a senior fertility specialist at Life Fertility Clinic Sydney. Tonight, I thought we'd talk about egg freezing. It's incredibly topical. Lots of people are asking questions about it, and I thought I'd just run through who it should be for and why you should be doing it, how it happens, and how we at Life Fertility Clinic Sydney can be helpful in the decision-making whether you should or you shouldn't freeze eggs. So, freezing eggs, the concept began with cancer patients in the past, now 15 to 20 years ago, when patients who had cancer and were going to undergo either chemotherapy or removal of the ovaries for some other reason, where they would lose their egg numbers, either altogether or substantially, we would collect the eggs before their chemotherapy or their surgery and put those eggs aside for future use. In those days, the success rate with those frozen eggs was actually quite small, probably 2% per egg that we collected. And that was because the process by which we froze eggs was in fact not ideal. A decade ago, scientists worked out that using what's called a vitrification technique is much more successful. And now we probably quote a success rate per egg collected that is mature of more like 8 to 10%. That doesn't sound very promising, but what you've got to remember is the protocols that we use generally stimulate multiple eggs. So that 8 to 10% is multiplied by the number of eggs that we can store. So what that means is that if you have eggs in the freezer, they'll be there in 5, 10, 15 years' time for you to use them to potentially have a child. Why would you want to do it? The why. In this day and age, changes in habits, social habits, have meant that women are getting later and later in bearing children. The driving forces in this delay compared with our mothers and our grandmothers is that we have careers to think about. We have financial stability to think about at a time when money is a problem, that buying a house is a problem. Even buying a car comes before potentially having a child. And that's not only the women that drive that, it's also the men, the partners. The second part of that, in terms of why, is that more and more women are not finding Mr. Right at an early age. And Mr. Right is also not wanting to commit at an early age. So it's now more and more uncommon to find couples getting together before the age of 30, which is the ideal time to be having a baby. So if you can put the eggs aside in those years between 25 and 35, they'll be there when you finally get around to wanting to have a baby at 38, 39, 40, 41. Why can't we just wait until we're 38, 39, 41? Well, it's because egg quality declines after the age of 35. When you're 30 years old and you're trying to get pregnant, when everything is normal, in 12 months, there's a 90% chance of getting pregnant. When you're 40, that has dropped to more like 50 to 60%. And that big drop is because egg quality has declined. So what you achieve with egg freezing is to put eggs aside when they were at higher quality to use later on in life. So that's why egg freezing sounds like a good step forward for many, many women. The ability to do that is dependent a little bit on your ovarian reserve, the number of eggs you've got in your ovary. And certainly the younger you are, the higher that number is going to be. But that's one of the first tests. If you went to see a doctor, specialist like me, and we were trying to work out whether it was the right thing for you to do to go down the egg freezing track, the first thing we would do is measure something called AMH, which is a substance that your ovary releases and is a reasonably good indicator of the number of eggs that you have. So if you are 30 and you have a good AMH, the statistics now, which are very strong because across the world egg freezing is now quite a common event. If you freeze eggs at 10, if you freeze 10 eggs at the age of 30, you've got a better than a 50-50 chance of a baby later on in life from those 10 eggs. When you get to 35, that number probably doubles to 20. So that the more eggs you have, the more chance you have of getting pregnant. But getting 20 eggs from one cycle of stimulation is actually relatively unusual. When you get to 40, the statistics are even worse. That to get a 50-50 chance of a baby from frozen eggs at the age of 40, you need getting up to 100 eggs. And to achieve that is almost impossible. Who should have eggs frozen? It's basically young women. But the 40-year-old is not going to do 10 or 15 cycles of IVF or stimulation to get those 100 eggs. The 35-year-old woman may go through 2 cycles, and the 30-year-old woman very often gets away with just 1 cycle to stimulate the ovaries to produce enough eggs to be put aside for the future. So age is the most important thing. So if you're going to have egg freezing, think about it in your late 20s and your early 30s.
And don't forget that you can access all the previous episodes by going to our website www.theivfjourney.com and select IVF Journey podcast from the navigation menu.